And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're talking about the latest update around Terry McLaurin and his contract situation. Next, we're going to be talking about what Dan Quinn and Adam Peters had to say at the pre-training camp press conference. And so we'll be looking at the key takeaways from that. Lastly, we're going to be talking about the roster move that the Washington Commanders have made. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And so let's start with the latest update here around Terry McLaurin. And so if you have not got a chance to see this at the time of this recording, Adam Schefter is where I saw this at, so you can check out his X page here. But he tweets that Terry McLaurin did not show up here for training camp. And so now where do we go from here? And so we're going to look at the three scenarios that could possibly play out here. And then we're going to talk about what Adam Peters had said earlier at the pre-training camp press conference. And so he's definitely asked about Terry McLaurin. And so more about that in a second. So here's the three scenarios that I'm thinking. And so the first scenario is that Terry McLaurin can come to practice starting tomorrow, and then hopefully the Washington Commanders are able to work out a deal, hopefully before week one. And so that is a scenario that we would love to see here. Next, the next scenario is that Terry McLaurin could arrive, hang out with teammates, not practice, and that would be a hold in. And then the next scenario would be that Terry McLaurin does not come at all, and then the team could go ahead and they could fine him each day that he's not there. And so those are the three scenarios that I see right now with this situation. And so we'll be talking about what Adam Peters had said earlier about Terry McLaurin, but this is the latest update around Terry McLaurin. And so more on that in a moment. So now I wanted to go ahead and jump into the pre-camp presser here. And so if you've not got a chance to see this, you definitely can go check this out on YouTube, or you can go over and you can actually read about this on commanders.com and look at the key takeaways here. And so I actually got some other takeaways that I wanted to talk about out of this. And so starting with Dan Quinn, first of all, I loved how he opened this thing up, and I think that he really set the tone. And I also think that Adam Peters set the tone as well, but more so Dan Quinn set the tone. And Adam Peters actually said that after he got done with his opening statement. And so I'll be paraphrasing this, but this is what he says after saying welcome to training camp. He says that everyone looks at the schedule and the first opponent. We look at it differently as we are the toughest opponent, and it's a tough matchup. Iron sharpens iron, and we have a hell of a lot of iron thanks to AP. All right, so I love that. I love how Dan Quinn comes in and he says, look, we are not worried about anything else other than what we have going on in this building and worried about ourselves. And so that reminds me of just the scene that was in Rocky, and it was Creed, and he takes him to the mirror and he says, take a good look here because this is going to be the toughest opponent that you're going to face. And I kind of got that from Dan Quinn in that statement. I think that that is really what it comes down to, because no matter what happens during the season, it's going to be about what you do as far as what you can control, I should say. And so that starts with going against yourself and going out there and getting the best out of yourself. And so that, I think, really indicates kind of what it is to be a Commander and to be in the building and to work at this thing every day. And so I love that Dan Quinn sets the tone this way. And so I think that this training camp is going to be a great training camp. I think it's going to be super competitive, especially with all the noise around this team and just all the focus, the national attention and everything else. I think that the competition level is going to be even bigger than it was a season ago. And speaking of competition, that is the next key point out of this that I wanted to talk about with Dan Quinn, because he is psyched for the competition. He says that, look, competition drives training camps. He feels like that is what is going to take place here over the next 5 to 6 weeks. Again, just paraphrasing this, but man, you really feel it when Dan Quinn goes into these scenarios. And so the first scenario here that he's talking about, and he's ultimately talking about, getting the best out of yourself and getting the best out of who you're going against. But he says, imagine being, a running back, and then you're in the open field against Bobby Wagner, who is a tackling OG. Can you beat him? Then he talks about being a DB and you're trying to match wits with Jaden Daniels, right? Then he's talking about being a defensive end and you're going against Laramie Tunsil. Then he talks about, again, if you're on guard and then you're going against Payne, which he's talking about Deron Payne there. And he's talking about these matchups bring out your best versus their best. And so talking about the competition level, which it is going to be about the competition level, the Commanders are going to have to take it to a high level. And they're going to have to take it higher than what they did a season ago, because what they did a season ago is just not going to work there. So they're going to have to take everything up just that much more. And so I appreciate that from Dan Quinn, once again, setting the tone here. And then next, he talks about growth. And so he is really excited about that. And he definitely talks about Jaden Daniels. And he also talked about Mikey Sammersteel. And he talked about how they were able to really self-correct during the season. And he says that, some players, they really have to wait till the offseason or whatnot. But he said that was not the case with Jaden Daniels and Mikey Sammersteel. He felt like that they went out there and they course corrected during the season. And so that just lets you know how special that these guys are, man, that they were able to go out there and find ways to get better during the season. So I can tell you as an athlete, that is one of the biggest things that you do have a challenge with, that, you're going out there and you're in the midst of the season, but finding ways to get better during that season, that is special, because usually you do have to wait till the offseason. And so that was good to hear from Dan Quinn. And then also too, he talks about other players and just really the leap that he's looking for. So he's talking about Ben Sinnott. He talks about Jordan McGee. He talks about also to Johnny Newton as well. He talks about how they put in a great spring and generally how, players do take a jump from year one to year two. But one of the things that I loved is he talks about the secret sauce, which is the confidence, and then just having the confidence in your skills. And so the skills and the confidence, really the secret sauce. And so that goes into what Dan Quinn has been talking about as far as not skipping steps in the development process. And so more insight from Dan Quinn when he's talking about growth. And then lastly, with Dan Quinn, when he was talking about his plan for practice and how this thing really goes. And so he says that it's a slow ramp up. And so you don't just go from 0 to 100 out there. He says that they like to start with the helmets. They even start on maybe a little bit of a smaller field. They'll go with the shells and then the lighter pads, and then they'll kind of work their way into the pads and everything else. And he said that this is something that I've heard him say countless times, that they are not going to miss one step of development. And it's all about how they go out there and execute. He says everybody does the same thing, but it's all about going out and executing. How sharp can you get the skills? And so Dan Quinn talking about expectations, growth, and everything else. So a great segment from him and just setting the tone there. I've said that several times, but that is what it is. And so next with Adam Peters. And so Adam Peters, with him, I think that the biggest takeaway out of the Adam Peters presser is he was asked about Terry McLaurin and that situation. And so just circling back here, and I'll start with what Adam Peters had to say about that. And so again, just really paraphrasing this, and you can go and read this now too as well. And so he essentially says that without a doubt, I think everybody in this building, values Terry very much. And we knew that coming in, so the year before. And then he also says that we knew that even more after spending a year with him. And in terms of where we're at, we've had conversations recently, and we'll look to have some more conversations, and we're going to do everything we can in order to get a deal done. All right. And so this was prior to, this tweet that we just showed and everything else. And so that is where Adam Peters is coming from with Terry McLaurin. And I've said this before, it sounds like that the Commanders want Terry McLaurin, and I think that Terry McLaurin wants the Commanders, but it's all about them coming to terms with the deal and what that looks like and everything else. And so that is what Adam Peters had to say. It sounds like that, look, he wants to get a deal done. And so he said that, verbatim here. And so the next thing that Adam Peters talks about that I found interesting is he's talking about the roster, and he talks about just the build of the roster. And so he was asked about that, and he was saying that, look, he believes that this roster he feels is better than what it was a year ago. He says the team is better with what they have on the roster. And even though, this team has the oldest roster in the NFL, I love what he had to say towards the end, where he was like, look, if there is somebody that's 22 or they're 35, whatever, if they can help us win, then we'll go out there and add them. And so again, paraphrasing that. And so Adam Peters letting you know that he's always being proactive as far as going out and trying to make this team better. And I think another thing that was key out of what Adam Peters talked about was Von Miller. And so they talked about Von Miller, they talked about that signing and everything else. And so one of the things that Adam Peters talks about with him is just how good he looked on film at this age and everything else. And that kind of goes into that next gen stat tweet that we talked about, that even Von Miller at this age, you get a chance to see how quick he gets off the football at the snap. And so I think that is something that is going to immediately translate for this defense. We've talked about this several times. It's just a matter of managing Von Miller and just really getting him to the postseason. That's what we're hoping for. And so, yes, we still got to get there. It's a long way to go. But I think that, look, Von Miller is the guy that, look, when you're going after rings, Von Miller is that guy. He's going to be the Indiana Jones that's going to help us go discover this thing. And so, you love the fact that you're seeing this type of stat. And also, too, with the 7.9 pressures, I think that right there lets you know that, look, even if Von Miller does not get home to the quarterback, the fact that he can generate that type of pressure, then that is going to open it up for a lot of different players on defense. And I've said this even in yesterday's video. When you look at defense, it's not just about the individual name on the back of the jersey. Like, it is an 11-man unit that's going to have to play well to really open it up for everybody to make plays. And so we'll see how this works out, but it sounds like that he was super excited about Von Miller coming over. And obviously, too, Adam Peters spent some time with Von Miller before with the Denver Broncos or whatnot. And so those were the key takeaways, from the press conference here. And so you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking. Are you psyched here for training camp coming up? Again, we had Dan Quinn setting the tone for I think the entire training camp and really for the season thus far. Are you looking forward to seeing that next? Also, too, let me know what you guys are thinking about what Dan Quinn had to say about growth here for Jaden Daniels. And lastly, what are you guys feeling here with Terry McLaurin? Again, this is the latest update around Terry McLaurin. If you've not got a chance to see this is pretty much everywhere. But I saw this here with Adam Schefter. And so he is not there right now. So if anything does break, we'll definitely make sure that we hop on and cover that. But as of right now, Terry McLaurin did not show up here. And so we'll see. Does he show up tomorrow? Does he practice? Does he show up? Is he a hold in? Or does he continue to hold out here? That is going to be the key. And so also, too, lastly, forgot about this. And so before we jump out of here, the Washington Commanders did make a roster move. They actually let Michael Wiley go ahead of camp here. And so Michael Wiley, look, he was an undrafted running back for the Washington Commanders. He essentially spent a lot of his time last season on the practice squad. He did sign a future deal to remain with the Commanders after the club fell in the NFC Championship game. And if you're not familiar with a future deal, it's a type of deal signed by teams with players who are not on their active roster at the end of the regular season. These players are typically those who were on the practice squad or were free agents. The contract secures the player's rights for the following season, but it doesn't impact the current year's salary cap or roster count. So that's what that means with a futures contract. If you wanted to know about that, maybe you knew about it. But anyway, guys, let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking about this roster move. What are we thinking here about Terry McLaurin and that situation? And then also, too, let me know what you guys are thinking about this press conference. And so, as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.